Some people pitch a fit when I start asking, who wrote those marvelous plays? They tell me to shut my trap, that they don't want to flap, nothing to unwrap about no authorship mystery. Truly, though, a merchant in grain who wrote knavery, as with Richard III, though Henry V is possibly worse. And in comedy, how about Dogberry and the Dromios and Juliet's nurse? Shakespeare is infinite, Shakespeare's illiterate. Something here doesn't fit the Stratford story. Someone illuminate me. As for tragedy, there's Mark Antony. Lear and Hamlet are absolute gold. Puck is magical, but most tragical is the rubbish we have been told. Something just won't cohere, Stratford's a myth, I fear. Who is this Earl de Vere that I've heard of? Someone illuminate me. In those plays, I want illumination.
Hello again. Michael Delahoyde here, welcoming all to Shakespeare Illuminated and part 2 of our appreciation of Hamlet, considered the best work by the best writer ever. And the play suspected of having most to do with the real life of its author, which makes the best sense when we consider Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, as the true writer behind the pen name Shakespeare. Last time, we met a young Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, dismayed over the death of his father and his mother Gertrude's hasty marriage to his uncle Claudius. Soon, Hamlet encounters the apparent ghost of his father, who tells Hamlet he was murdered by the uncle. And Hamlet must avenge his death. So one question we asked was, what exactly is this ghost and from where? Ambiguity about this remains. Purgatory, hell? Hamlet acknowledges later on that the devil may take a pleasing shape. And so he's got an element of distrust in all of this. And besides, the mission is murder. Murder most foul, as in the best it is. But Hamlet's supposed to murder? That would be scanned. We also addressed the question, why does Hamlet wait so long to act? Because he has a brain. He wants further evidence of the truth than just the bloody instructions of an apparition. So after joyously watching the first actor of a troupe of players declaim the classical description of the murder of King Priam of Troy and the grief of Queen Hecuba, a widow's emotion that he did not witness in his own mother, Hamlet decides that having the players act out a particular scene will somehow catch the conscience of the king and have the guilty indications that he needs. We've also seen Hamlet monitored closely and suffocatingly by his girlfriend Ophelia's father, the court counselor Polonius, and we recognize the Earl of Oxford in the situation of Hamlet there, and his father-in-law, Lord Burleigh, Queen Elizabeth's chief counselor, in Polonius. In this episode, we also want to ask, what exactly drives Ophelia insane, if there is an answer to it? And what does Hamlet mean by his enigmatic last words? And I'll warn you, as with the ghosts, again, this play has the word question show up 17 times. It's all about questions. The first line of the whole play was a question. And I don't know how many answers we end up getting. And part of the agony of this play and experiencing is that we live in this cloudy world of ambiguities and difficult to get answers. So the chat's open, and if you have a more formal question, you can hit the Q&A button you should see down below. Stick around for a Q&A session immediately following. And all right, the readiness is all. We left off last time with the famous to be or not to be speech, where Hamlet was considering, again, as in earlier soliloquies, the desirability of just getting out, just being in oblivion, since life seems such a misery. but he recognizes that there is this uncertainty about what you get. So what if you got to die and got out? What if you decided you were going to kill yourself and then realize that you wake up dead? In other words, the hyper consciousness that you're trying to shut down. Brain, please shut up. Stop harassing me. Enough nights of insomnia. What if you don't escape that too? And so we are all ultimately cowards. Well, immediately after that, Ophelia comes in and addresses Hamlet. And this is a difficult point in the relationship, but especially because she's daddy's little pawn. And we know that Polonius and Claudius are eavesdropping on this conversation.
Good, my lord. How does your honor for this many a day?
I humbly thank you. Well.
My lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed to redeliver. I pray you now receive them.
No, not I. I never gave you aught.
My honored lord, you know right well you did, and with them words of so sweet breath composed as made the things more rich. Their perfume lost, take these again, for to the noble mind rich gifts wax poor when givers prove unkind. There, my lord.
Are you honest?
My lord?
Are you fair?
What means your lordship?
That if you be honest and fair, your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty.
Could beauty, my lord, have better commerce than with honesty?
Aye, truly. For the power of beauty will sooner transform honesty from what it is to a bawd, than the force of honesty can translate beauty into his likeness. This was sometimes a paradox, but now the time gives it proof. I did love you once.
Indeed, my lord, you made me believe so.
You should not have believed me. For virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. I loved you not.
I was the more deceived.
Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? I am myself indifferent honest, but yet I could accuse me of such things that it were better my mother had not borne me. I am very proud, revengeful, ambitious, with more offences of my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, and which tempt him, he has reasons to justify such crimes or time to act them in. What should such fellows as I do, crawling between earth and heaven? We are arrant knaves all, believe none of us. Go thy ways to a nunnery. Where's your father?
At home, my lord?
Let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house. Farewell.
Oh, help him, ye sweet heavens.
If thou dost marry, I'll give thee this plague for thy dowry. Be thou as chaste as ice, as pure as snow, thou shalt not escape calumny. Get thee to a nunnery, go, farewell. Or if thou wilt marry, marry a fool, for wise men know well what monsters you make of them. To a nunnery go, and quickly too, farewell.
Heavenly powers restore him.
I have heard of your paintings too well enough. God hath given you one face, and you make yourselves another. You jig, you amble, and you lisp, and nickname God's creatures, and make your wantonness your ignorance. Go to, I'll no more on't, it hath made me mad. I say, we will have no more marriages. Those that are married already, all but one shall live. The rest shall keep as they are. To a nunnery, go!
I think that the moment Hamlet turns is when he hears her say, "For to the noble mind, rich gifts wax poor when givers prove unkind." And suddenly he flips out right there. Why? Well, Who talks like that in these little cheesy adages, especially in rhyme, except she's daddy's little parrot here. And that just drives him nuts. Some editions of Hamlet will tell you that nunnery, in addition to being what Hamlet would want of everybody in this state of sexual nausea and disgust, and just he needs something to be pure. But these footnotes will tell you it's also a slang term for a whorehouse, which seems bizarre. So which does he mean? Or is it typical Shakespeare? Both. Well, Claudius and Polonius have eavesdropped on this, and Polonius thinks, oh, I got another way we can eavesdrop. And so he's proposing another spy session where he'll hide and see what Hamlet has to say to his mother pretty soon. But first, we get the play within the play. And leading into it, Hamlet shows himself to be a pretty good director, artistic director, a producer, and many other things other than revenge hero, where he instructs the actors, no, be sawing the overacting and melodrama and all that nonsense. Don't upstage everybody else, especially if you think you're a hot clown and everybody's laughing at you. It just is too cheap and cheesy. So he wants a natural sort of theater, and he wants this to work because in his mind, it will reveal something about the audience members, and in particular, we're going to want to look at Claudius. This isn't the only play where Shakespeare does think that there is something that comes out in you, another side of you, when you are an audience member versus your normal self. But as for this being a determination of guilt, that usually strikes most people as peculiar, but Hamlet's in one of his manic phases leading into this. And the portrait of this director, producer, author, acting coach sure seems to fit Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, and indeed him being a patron of artists and presumably actors too. So leading into the play within the play, we can see Hamlet in this manic, joyous mood. Maybe just because he likes the control, but he has interactions with a whole lot of people before the play, especially including Ophelia in this next scene.
How fares our cousin, Hamlet?
Excellent, i' faith. Of the chameleon's dish, i.e. the heir promised crabbed. He cannot feed capon so.
I have nothing with this answer, Hamlet. These words are not mine.
No, nor mine now. My lord, you played once in the university, you say?
That did I, my lord, and was accounted a good actor.
What did you enact?
I did enact Julius Caesar. I was killed at the Capitol. Brutus killed me.
It was a brute part of him to kill so capital a calf there.
Come hither, my dear Hamlet, sit by me.
No, good mother. Here's metal more attractive.
Oh, ho. Do you mark that?
Lady, shall I lie in your lap?
No, my lord.
I mean my head upon your lap.
Aye, my lord.
Do you think I meant country matters?
I think nothing, my lord.
It's a fair thought to lie between a maid's legs.
What is, my lord?
No thing.
You are merry, my lord.
Who, I?
Aye, my lord.
Oh, God, you're only jig-maker. What should a man do but be merry? For look you how cheerfully my mother looks, and my father died within 2 hours.
Nay, 'tis twice 2 months, my lord.
Oh, so long? Well, nay, then, let the devil wear black, for I'll have a suit of sables. Oh, heavens! Died 2 months ago and not forgotten yet. Then there's hope a great man's memory may outlive his life, oh, half a year.
Now, Hamlet has a spy too in Horatio, who's supposed to be watching what's going on. But it's also disturbing that Hamlet's so manic that he seems to blow the potential effect of the play, rather than letting it play out and him being silent in the background. As for this initial discussion he has with Ophelia, this too is manic and full of the body, the symbol of the female. The nothing, a fair thought to lie between maid's legs. But what I recently realized too is that a little while Ophelia, after Hamlet's running circles around everybody and not being very clear about what he really means, she says, you are not, you're nothing. Which isn't meant to be an insult. It's meant to be kind of a dismissive, you're just being silly. This means nothing. But it's the not again, the obsessive O that Oxford has been, ever since he was young, playing on. Additionally, Hamlet says something insane again when he says, for oh, the hobby horse is forgot. What? So you got to look at the notes. It's a hobby horse. A traditional character in the Morris dance and the May games, which became, it is not clear why, the type of what is forgotten and the subject of a popular catchphrase. Thanks. What? But you wonder if, since the Middle Ages and Renaissance also saw hobby horses as something that you straddle, and maids are not supposed to be doing that kind of thing, maybe there's more bawdy here. But even if not, 4040, the hobby horses forgot. 4040 is Oxford's code number at court. So here he's almost signing himself into, or burying his identity into, this seemingly crazy talk. That'll come back later in a much more poignant way. 40. Well, the play itself involves a king and a queen protesting love for each other, but the queen, even if the king ever died, she would never take a second husband. And this is where, when there's an interruption, Gertrude can say, the lady doth protest too much. But the victim of the poisoning in the ear may have been a Francisco Maria della Rovere, Duke of Urbino, who was supposedly poisoned in the ear in the earlier 1500s. And this guy appears as one of Castiglione's characters in The Courtier, kind of the job description, in a way, for being the Renaissance man. Very influential on the young Earl of Oxford. And in fact, de Vere wrote a Latin preface for a 1572 Latin translation of Castiglione. So he's all wrapped up in this. Now, additionally, Urbino was painted before his death, of course, by Titian, and the portrait seems to resemble the ghost of Hamlet's father when you get descriptive details of the father's ghost. Where could you have seen this? Well, de Vere would have had to seen it on his grand tour, but it would have been Titian. So it's the same artist and same place or studio where Oxford would have seen the Adonis with his cap or bonnet that gets described weirdly several instances in Venus and Adonis, Shakespeare's poem. Well, at the point where the poisoning does take place, it does seem to have an effect on Claudius. And depending on which version you see in the films or which production you may witness, it seems like it should be an absolute panic attack for the guy. And sometimes it's underplayed, and it doesn't matter. In either case, Hamlet insists, aha, proof. Just because you stand up and say, give me some light, or you just don't like the play or whatever. But something about it convinces Hamlet that this works. So he is elated. He's just joyous with Horatio. He runs circles around Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are still trying to figure out, what's your problem, my lord? And he says, well, there's an old musty proverb, while the grass grows, you know? The proverb is, while the grass grows, the horse starves. So it's all very well that there's prosperity and all, but if you have to wait for it forever, you'll starve. The relevance of this is that in a 1576 letter from de Vere, when he's abroad to Lord Burleigh, he uses the same adage. I am content myself, according to the English proverb, that it is my hap to starve while the grass doth grow. So Shakespeare is quoting himself. He's Oxford. Polonius comes in and Hamlet runs circles around him and makes him a yes man by saying, see those clouds? That looks like a weasel, right? Yes, it looks very much like no, it actually looks like a whale, right? Yeah, it looks like a whale. And it's just game playing out of his joy. And that too will become maybe a little bit relevant later in an echo. Well, Hamlet's going to go see his mother now. He's been summoned. And he says, I will speak daggers to her, but use none. And there's some speculation that after Oxford's banishment, when he was called back to court, there was reportedly a pretty heated discussion between Oxford and Elizabeth that ended happily with Oxford being accepted back. But he might have had to prepare himself like Hamlet does for a queen's interview. Polonius hides himself behind an arras, behind a tapestry, and he's going to be listening in. But when Hamlet comes in and is accused, you have your father much offended, Hamlet says, you have my father much offended, to the queen. In their heated discussion, the queen gets nervous and utters something that has Polonius worried behind the arras that something terrible is going down, and he makes a noise, and Hamlet says, what the king, and stabs through the arras, and Polonius is dead. One commentator has a troubling illumination on this, that if Hamlet thinks it's the king, how is that possible? Because he had just seen the king downstairs. And that's out of order here, but that's the next scene when Hamlet sees the king after the play. He seems to be at prayer. So here's the king not realizing that Hamlet will come upon him pretty soon.
Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. And like a man to double business bound, I stand in pause where I shall first begin, and both neglect. What if this hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Whereto serves mercy but to confront the visage of offense? But oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? That cannot be, for I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder. My crown, mine own ambition, my queen. May one be pardoned and retain the offense? What then? What rests? Try what repentance can. Well, what can it not? But what can it when one cannot repent? O cursed state! O bosom black as death! O limed soul that's struggling to be free art born engaged! Help, angels! Make assay! Bow, stubborn knees, and heart with strings of steel, be soft as sinews of the newborn babe. All may be well.
Now might I do it bad. Now he is praying. And now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven. So am I revenged. That will be scanned. A villain kills my father, and for that I, his sole son, do the same villain sent to heaven? This is higher in salary, not revenge. He took my father grossly full of bread, with all his crimes broad blown as flush as May, and how his audit stands, who knows save heaven? But in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him, and I am then revenged, to take him in the purging of his soul when he is fit and seasoned for his passage? No. Up, sword, and know thou a more horrid hent. When he is drunk, asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, at gaming, swearing, or about some act that has no relish of salvation in't. Then trip him, that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes. My mother stays. This physic but prolongs thy sickly days.
My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go.
That phrase, grossly full of bread, Roger Strittmatter points out in his study of Oxford's Geneva Bible, comes from that source. The irony here, though, is that without, as Claudius acknowledges, without giving back his possessions for which he did the murder, in other words, my crown, my own ambition, and my queen, then he is not in any state of sanctity here, because the sacrament of penance, if we're still going along with that, is penitence, confession, and restitution. And he has no intention of involving himself in restitution. So Hamlet might have killed him without overthinking it about his soul going to heaven, but still admirably, he's thinking, and that would be scanned. We want to think about this, and maybe killing Claudius in cold blood isn't exactly the way we want to go about it. So the reason I bring up that scene with the scene in Gertrude's closet, by the way, or chamber, a kind of a private sitting room. It's not her bedroom, but Laurence Olivier got all into Freud, and ever since then, we've been throwing mom around the bed. Anyway, Hamlet goes to the closet, and that killing of Polonius, but Hamlet was just downstairs on his way upstairs to see his mother. So he should realize, unless we really are architecturally involved with secret passages or something, how would the king get up there and hide behind? So one scholar said that maybe Hamlet knows exactly what he's doing at that hot moment. I don't know what to say about it, and it's another one of those gaps or impossible to resolve moments. It's also pointed out that young Edward de Vere did also kill, and I think it was an undercook, but pretty certain that the guy was a spy on behalf of his father-in-law, Lord Burleigh. Burleigh called it self-defense. That term is going to be punned on in this play. And perhaps the scene was a transmutation of that incident in some respect, because Polonius, Burleigh is behind it. All right. Well, the scene continues, even though there's a bleeding corpse over there, between Hamlet and his mother. And most interesting is the way Hamlet rails at her in this very next scene, in her closet.
Look here upon this picture, and on this, the counterfeit presentment of two brothers. See what a grace was seated on this brow. Hyperion's curls, the front of Jove himself. an eye like Mars to threaten and command, a station like the herald Mercury, new lighted on a heaven-kissing hill, a combination and a form indeed, where every god did seem to set his seal to give the world assurance of a man. This was your husband. Look you now what follows. Here is your husband, like a mildewed ear blasting his wholesome brother. Have you eyes? Could you on this fair mountain leave to feed and batten on this moor? Huh? Have you eyes? But you cannot call it love, for at your age the heyday in the blood is tame. It's humble and waits upon the judgment. And what judgment would step from this to this? Oh, shame! Where is thy blush? Rebellious hell, if thou canst mutiny in a matron's bones and reason pander's will.
O Hamlet, speak no more. Thou turn'st mine eyes into my very soul, and there I see such black and grained spots as will not leave their tinct.
To live in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed, stewed in corruption, honeying and making love.
Oh, speak to me no more. These words like daggers enter in mine ears. No more, sweet Hamlet.
A murderer and a villain, a slave that is not 20th part the tithe of your precedent lord, a vice of kings, a cutpurse of the empire and the rule, that from a shelf the precious diadem stole and put it in his pocket.
No more.
A king of shreds and patches.
Here's something interesting. We're looking at an image of some sort of Hamlet's father, old Hamlet. And he says, the front of Jove himself, king of the gods, an eye like Mars to threaten and command. And you think, well, he's stately and warrior-like and impressive in that way. But one scholar thought, well, Jove, the other name for Jove is Jupiter, and Mars is known as the red planet, an eye like Mars. And Jupiter has a red spot, a red eye. Jupiter's great red spot. But nobody knew about this until the telescope in the 1660s. So how does Shakespeare know this? Well, because he's infinite, he knows everything. Or we dumb him down and say, no, it's just an accident. You're reading too much into Shakespeare. Yeah, right. What it turns out, though, is that the Digges family, Leonard Digges, his father and his son, one of them died in 1574, but he and his son were working on what they called a perspective trunk. And it was kind of a combination of mirror lenses and convex lenses. It was proto-telescope technology. And presumably it's a good idea to kind of shut up about, messing in God's domain scientifically in those times. So it was kept a secret, but certainly Oxford at court was interested in absolutely everything. And so here he is, Shakespeare, an expert in astrophysics. After Hamlet has his mother actually agree with him that she doesn't trust Claudius, maybe, or at least that she's going to pull back from it, Hamlet says he's going to lug the guts, Polonius, the corpse, into another room. This counselor is now most secret and most grave, who was in life a foolish prating knave. I don't know. Every once in a while, I like absolute callousness in a case like this, I suppose. Well, Hamlet knows that the king wants to banish him to England, and now that he's committed this act, it's pretty much a done deal, too. In Act 4, Hamlet toys with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern over, where is this body? Calls Rosencrantz a sponge. And they do use language, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, when they're talking to Claudius about their obsequiousness. And basically, they're willing to be parasites upon the king. And that's what they are. Claudius, before Hamlet comes into the room, frets that Hamlet is loved of the distracted multitude. He's really popular among the people. And how is this even possible? Hamlet, has he had such an opportunity to be that famous and beloved by people? Where is this? Well, we got an Oxfordian explanation for you. There is this doggerel processional poem celebrating the return of Sir Francis Drake from his adventures. And Elizabeth is there, and then all the dignitaries are there, and they're parading. And somebody wrote this: Sir Francis, Sir Francis, Sir Francis is come, Sir Robert, and also Sir William, his son. That's Robert Cecil, son of Lord Burleigh. And Ake, also, the good Earl of Huntingdon, marched gallantly on the road. Then came the Lord Chamberlain with his white staff. And all the people began to laugh. And then the Queen began to speak, "You're welcome home, Sir Francis Drake." The white staff identifies the Lord Great Chamberlain, Oxford. So why, on his appearance, does everybody in the crowd start laughing? Presumably with delight. Now, unless he's doing something like a rude visual stunt with his great white staff, the only other possibility might be a suggestion that he had a following because of the popularity of his plays being rehearsed in public theaters or private theaters or taverns in preparation for production at court. So somehow, if he's appearing in them himself too, he is a well-known celebrity, and the court, and certainly Lord Burleigh, would think that he's debasing himself by hanging out with these people or selling out to popularity too. But all the people began to laugh. He's just a joy to see, and you just can't help it. Well, Hamlet's brought in, and he toys with Claudius about where is this corpse of Polonius. And here he is, snarking off to his stepfather.
Now, Hamlet, where's Polonius?
At supper.
At supper, where?
Not where he eats, but where he is eaten. A certain convocation of politic worms are eaten at him. Your worm is your only emperor for diet. We fat all creatures else to fat us, and we fat ourselves for maggots. Your fat king and your lean beggar is but variable service, 2 dishes, but 1 table. That's the end.
Alas, alas.
A man may fish with the worm that hath eat of a king, and eat of the fish that hath fed of that worm.
What dost thou mean by this, Hamlet?
Oh, nothing, but to show you how a king may go a progress through the guts of a beggar.
Where is Polonius?
In heaven. Send thither to see. If your messenger find him not there, seek him in the other place yourself. But indeed, if you find him not within this month, you shall nose him as you go up the stairs into the lobby.
Go, seek him there.
Oh, he will stay till you come.
One traditional aspect of that is the medieval reminder that we are all worm food and don't get too attached to the things of this world. But it's also riddled with wordplay here, because apparently Polonius, modeled after Lord Burleigh, is giving you these little verbal clues, and we are told that Lord Burleigh went around bragging with pride at having been born during the so-called Diet of Worms. This is the convocation of secular and church leaders in the German city, and presided over by the emperor. So you get the emperor for diet, a certain convocation of politic worms, and so on. And so it's another skewering of Oxford's father-in-law, Lord Burleigh. And by the way, I decided to check it out. Big deal. So you were born during and you weren't. early. The Diet of Worms was early in 1521, several months after Cecil's birth. So knock it off. Now, but even more delightful for everybody, did you catch it? In heaven, that's where Polonius is. Send thither to see. If your messenger find him not there, seek him in the other place yourself. It's the Shakespearean way of saying, what? Go to hell. Well, Hamlet leaves. Claudius is sending him to England with papers to accompany him saying, do it, England, kill Hamlet. And you might imagine the original response to do it, England, when you are English and you just, now you hate this guy. No, we're not going to kill this beloved character, Hamlet. Ah, how awful. Not going to give this guy a break anymore. At the last soliloquy that Hamlet has in Act 4, he has seen this military exploit in progress where soldiers, thousands of soldiers are going presumably to die over a little small piece of land. And Hamlet just has another philosophical outburst about what is life all about. Fortinbras seems to have mastered his passions, but Hamlet, in his last soliloquy, has to ask about the ironies of his situation. And let's hear what he has to say. Remember, this is the last soliloquy of his. Something changes after Act 4 in him, and we're never going to see him just talking to himself again.
How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge. What is a man, if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast, no more. Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fust in us unused. Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which courted hath but one part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward, I do not know why yet I live to say this things to do. Still I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. Examples gross as earth exalt me. Witness this army of such mass and charge, led by a delicate and tender prince, whose spirit, with divine ambition puffed, makes mouths at the invisible event, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare, even for an eggshell. Likely to be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honour's at the stake. How stand I then, that have a father killed, a mother stained, excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, whilst to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men? Fantasy and trick of fame go to their graves like beds. Fight for a plot, whereon the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough and continent to hide the slain. From this time forth, my thoughts be bloody, or be nothing worth.
So powerful, I don't want to think in the direction of cringing, but he said that 4 acts ago about how he's going to be solely focused on his task. The additional irony this time is he's going in the wrong direction. However, what's especially powerful here is that I consider this the first on-the-scene critique of consumer culture. Near the beginning of that speech, what is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed, a beast no more? And originally that might have been just an aristocratic perspective, but now it's just any intelligent person's perspective about what you see around you, I think. Back at court, Ophelia's acting really bizarre, let's say insane. But she's not acting like Hamlet was. So now we have actual insanity or madness. But what's particularly interesting about the treatment of this is that her speech is nothing, says someone, yet the unshaped use of it doth move the hearers to collection. They yawn at it and botch the words up to fit their own thoughts. In other words, we're listening very carefully to the mad ravings of Ophelia, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how is that a clue? And if we decode it and read it carefully, it's going to fit my theory. Well, this has been going on all the play, where Polonius has insisted that Hamlet's madness is all about love for Polonius's daughter, Ophelia. And mom thought, no, it's probably our over hasty marriage. Well, here, she's just off her nut, and people are trying to figure out, well, what is this all about? One of the nice features of this is that this is what we have been doing for 400 years too, that we try to decode what and look at the footnotes and what do those flowers mean and so on, in addition to the people in the play trying to figure all of this out. And some of the theories that they botch the words up to fit their own thoughts are pretty bizarre. One of them is, I don't know how insane this might be, but I've got it. Ophelia's pregnant. All right, well, can come up with 11 other theories, but if you listen to her songs, and I find that very difficult to do, you will wonder, why is she singing such smutty songs about someone who's dead and persistently referring to someone who's dead, but the only person who's dead really is her daddy, and yet we get these smut songs. So yeah, let's go on. Laertes returns, and he's outraged by the death of his father, makes bombastic pronouncements of vengeance. This is the guy that the ghost wanted to go after somebody, but he's further tortured by Ophelia's insanity, and yet Claudius gets to talk him off the ledge and probably manipulate him in some conversation that we don't get and some conversation that we do. That's coming. In the meantime, a really quick scene is that Horatio gets a letter from Hamlet, and he says that he was involved in a pirate attack on his way to England. It's entirely extraneous material for this, and it's just too much. Who cares? And unless you're going to have pirates singing a song, that would be really cool. But otherwise, what is this doing in here? Except for the fact that Oxford was attacked by pirates on his way back to England in 1576. So it's just a little extra nugget in there to show you who is the real author. The king, now we rejoin him talking to Laertes mid-conversation, and he says, oh boy, and I'm in a tough position because of the great love the general gender bear him, and Hamlet's mother likes him too, so I can't really kill him. Tough position to be in, actually. But Laertes is riled up against Hamlet, and we're going to goad him into a fight, and maybe some poison will be involved. We'll talk more about this, but here's your mother. She comes, or Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, comes in, and she's got some news. Sorry to interrupt the meeting, but you probably want to know this.
One woe doth tread upon another's heels, so fast they follow. Your sister's drowned, Laertes. There is a willow, grows aslant a brook, that shows his hoar leaves in the glassy stream. And therewith fantastic garlands did she make, of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples, that liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do dead men's fingers call them. There, on the pendant boughs, her coronet weeds clambering to hang, an envious sliver broke. when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide, and mermaid-like, awhile they bore her up, which time she chanted snatches of old lords, as one incapable of her own distress, or like a creature native and endued unto that element. But long it could not be, till that her garments, heavy with their drink, pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay to muddy death.
Well, a question often not asked by many people is, how does she know all this? So you want to picture this something like she's in, Gertrude is looking out a tower window and sees Ophelia ranting and singing and running along and picking flowers and then falling in the swamp. But the detail that you get suggests that she was much closer. So if you want to give her a break, Gertrude, you might say that, oh, well, she's just trying to soften the news and make it more romantic for Laertes, who's going to be grief-stricken about the death of his sister now, too, in addition to his father. Or it's another question that's unanswered. To what extent did Gertrude get involved in any of the shady events going on? So I recently read a critic who says that part of Hamlet's problem is he doesn't know to what extent his mother is involved in all of this. Does he want to catch the conscience of the queen, too? Because, says this guy, and I think about it, and yeah, he's right, when you get a hasty remarriage after the death of a spouse, usually, isn't it true that that relationship, the new marriage, has not just sprung up, but it's been going on for a while in one aspect or another? So do we know ever to what extent Gertrude is complicit in the death of old Hamlet or any of these other shady deals? Additionally, to muddy these waters, not intentionally, but Earl Showerman points out that the case of Mary Queen of Scots has that conspiracy suspected with her lover, the Earl of Bothwell, in the murder of her husband, Lord Darnley, and she rather hastily remarried Bothwell. So part of this is being disturbed by, or Oxford being disturbed by the remarriage of his mother in disrespect to his father. Some of it might be this influence of the case of Mary Queen of Scots. Some of it might be everything. But once again, we don't have to decide. It's not a matter of resolving either or. It's Shakespeare. So it's almost always at least two things at the same time. And so ends Act 4. So next, we don't know how much time has passed, and most people are kind of disturbed because it seemed as if Hamlet was an adolescent in the earlier acts. But now you even get mathematical indications that he is much older. And he couldn't have been gone that long because he'll be in the graveyard and witness some matters that have recently taken place. We've got some comic relief with two gravediggers, and they're talking about, well, what we find out is Ophelia's burial. And the problem is, did she commit suicide or not? And then there's this, they're bungling some legal terminology. But for the longest time, scholars have recognized the relevance here of a case called Hales versus Pettit concerning suicide. And it does matter if you're going to be buried in sacred ground or not, in an earlier age at least. But as one Oxfordian pointed out to me this week, Hales versus Pettit was an event, the suicide of a nobleman in 1554. And it went to court in 1558 and was decided in 1562. So if traditional dating has Hamlet written in 1601. What a obscure, obsolete, and pointless reference to a much earlier case. But as we Oxfordians know, Oxford knows the law, and this has convinced a number of lawyers and Supreme Court judges that Oxford is Shakespeare. If you want to know more about this matter, we don't have time for every rabbit hole here. There is a link to Tom Renier's talk about the law and Shakespeare, and especially some material about Hales versus Pettit too. It is a link from my website. You can see in the bibliography, and there'll probably be a link below here eventually too. Anyway, Hamlet and Horatio over here, the gravedigger's singing, and Hamlet's worried that he doesn't really get gallows humor and understand that this guy should be more serious about his work. And he talks a lot with Horatio about death. But after kind of a humorous dig at England, Hamlet has to consider seriously death now. And it's noted that Hamlet is no longer giving those speeches to himself, those soliloquies. He's now always talking to somebody else. He seems to have matured greatly. And there's no self-indulgence anymore, much less any antic disposition. But here is a famous scene with Hamlet and Horatio in the graveyard right now.
This? Let me see. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. Oh, a fellow of infinite jest, most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times, and now, how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rises at it. Here hung those lips I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your gibes now? Your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table on a roar. Not one now to mock your own grinning, quite chop-fallen. Now get you to my lady's chamber, and tell her, let her paint an inch thick to this favour, she must come. Make her laugh at that. Dost thou think Alexander looked to this fashion of the earth? And smelt so. Ah.
The painting an inch thick referring to makeup, one would probably be thinking of Queen Elizabeth who did this, and Hamlet's realization and Oxford's realization, Shakespeare's realization, that you're not going to beat time. But additionally in this scene, instead of any of that rhetorical indulgences that Hamlet's been doing since the beginning of the play, this is no longer, oh, I wish I could just evaporate into a dew. Oh, I wish God didn't say I can't commit suicide. This is real. This is facing death as closely as you can without facing your own or being in the moment of your own. And that's when he realizes death is not a nice soap opera dying scene with pleasant music in the background. It smells, it stinks. And so that absolute sensory experience of death is completely different to Hamlet, and you already sense that he has changed a bit too. As for Yorick, why are we told that he's been dead for 23 years now? And Hamlet knew him and remembers him as a child, I guess. So how old is Hamlet? Like 30 now, suddenly? Rapidly aging syndrome, speaking of soap operas. Alas, poor Yorick. Well, de Vere did grow up with a household that included troops of actors. His father had some troops of actors. And then there's been the suggestion that Henry VIII's jester, Will Somers, who died in 1560, might have been the inspiration here. Oxford's father, the 16th Earl, was Lord Great Chamberlain to Henry VIII from 1540 to Henry's death in 1547. And from 1556 onwards, the 16th Earl was patron to his own troupe of players. So perhaps Will Somers was somebody who the young Oxford would have remembered in this regard. Pretty soon, the funeral party comes in carrying Ophelia, and Laertes is particularly bombastic about this and giving to excesses in behavior in his rhetoric and all. But Hamlet presents himself, Laertes flips out, and they realize that a duel is coming. It seems like the challenge has been made there. Hamlet reveals a side to his own philosophy that is beyond mature at this point, I would say. And in preparing for the deal of the duel, he's talking to Horatio, his one good friend, and says, "There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will." There really is meaning, no matter how we bungle up our lives. And I'm impressed by it because it's part of the wisdom of comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell, who said, and he's paraphrasing Schopenhauer, the philosopher, "When you reach a certain age, you look back over your life, it seems to have had an order. It seems to have been composed by someone. And those events, when they occurred, seemed merely accidental and occasional, and just something that happened turned out to be the main elements in a consistent plot." So just like your dreams, where you think something's happening to you, but really you are composing your dreams, so too you might unconsciously be composing your life. And no matter how you bungle it up, there's something there behind it that is divine. Well, Hamlet also calls himself a ghostwriter on the darker side, saying that he did a switcheroo on those letters that were supposed to lead to his own death, where Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, will be in trouble instead of Hamlet when he went to England. And then in comes a new courtier, Osric. I guess he's the replacement for Polonius because he sure seems it. And where earlier Hamlet was saying, "Hey, Polonius, look at that. That cloud looks like a weasel." "Oh, yes, yes, my lord. I'm certainly. No, that looks like a whale. Yes, yes, my lord." Now they play the same trick in a goofier way on this guy. "It's really hot. Take your hat off." "Yes, it actually is hot." "Actually, it's kind of cold. You should put your hat back on." "Oh, yes, yes, yes." So another Joseph Campbell statement here for this busy trifler is, when everybody you meet reminds you of somebody you've already talked to, and everything you hear you've heard before, you're ready for another show. And there's something okay about what's coming when you realize, we've been through this before. We don't need it again. So about the coming duel, Hamlet is resigned, but not exactly passive. Osric reports the odds that are being laid in the betting on this duel between Laertes and Hamlet. And the recently departed Sam C. Saunders, the mathematician, gave a presentation once at a conference where he explained all of this, starting out with a very simple mathematical equation. 14 plus 11 is what? Everybody. Then he went a little bit higher, and then he went a little bit higher with a train A leaving station B at 8 o'clock at 40 miles per hour and all that stuff. And then we were weeded out very gradually. And finally, he got to the odds described in the duel here. Over everybody's head. It was absolutely incredible. So it's another case of Shakespeare knowing everything about everything in the most sophisticated way in another discipline that it's just so hard to believe. Anyway, before the duel, Hamlet asks forgiveness of Laertes and says, "You are my brother. I am regretful that it's come to this, and We here at Shakespeare Illuminated are nonviolent people. So if you want to see all this play out, there are a lot of films. Check my filmography on my website. But as most of you know, here's what's happened. Claudius has poisoned a tankard of wine, and he tries to arrange for Hamlet to drink it, but Gertrude accidentally does instead. Hamlet does pretty well in the first two touches with his sword, but usually in a sneaky way, Laertes wounds Hamlet with a poisoned sword, and Hamlet's outraged. And in the scuffle, swords are flipped around, and Hamlet's able to wound Laertes with the poisoned sword. Gertrude has drunk the poison. She drops and blames the drink. Laertes fesses up and announces the king's to blame. So Hamlet wounds Claudius with the poisoned sword and has him drink some of the poison too. And the king's last insistence is odd. He says, "I am but hurt." And it's hilarious, but you don't really hear it because of all the chaos, especially in the Kenneth Branagh movie, where Hamlet has thrown a sword and skewered the guy to his own throne, and then swung down on a chandelier and bashed into him, and then made him drink poison. I am but hurt. Oh my Lord. Denial, huh? So that's the end of Claudius. In other words, in the heat of the moment, finally, when all is, at least in this case, unambiguously clear who's to blame, Hamlet can and does act. So it's personal and vicious against Hamlet now, no question. And he's avenging not only his father's death, but also his mother's, and basically his own that's about to come. So now remains Hamlet's death scene. Here.
Heaven make thee free of it. I follow thee. I am dead, Horatio. Wretched queen, adieu. You that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mutes or audience to this act, had I but time, as this fell sergeant's death is strict in his arrest. Oh, I could tell you. But let it be. Horatio, I am dead. Thou livest. Report me in my cause aright to the unsatisfied.
Never believe it. I am more an antique Roman than a Dane. Here's yet some liquor left.
As thou art a man, give me the cup. Let go, by heaven, I'll have it. A wounded name. King standing thus unknown shall live behind me. If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart, absent thee from felicity a while, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story. Oh, I die, Horatio. Potent poison quite outcrows my spirit. Cannot live to hear the news from England. But I do prophesy the election lights on Fortinbras. He has my dying voice. So tell him, with the occurrence more and less, which have solicited. Rest is silence.
Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince. And flights of angels sing me to thy rest.
One odd thing is, as one Oxfordian noted, The prince did not have a wounded name, nor was there any untold story within the play which was withheld from the world. So rather than that utterance fitting Hamlet's case, it makes much more sense coming from Oxford. Another aspect there is being more antique Roman than a Dane. What he means is that, as with Julius Caesar and Godfather movies and the old Italian way is honor in suicide. And Hamlet says, no, you can't kill yourself. No matter what the pain, you need to last so you can tell my story. The Earl of Oxford had a cousin, Horatio, and at one time he was going to leave Horatio his estates. And if Hamlet dying is asking for his story to get out there, and if the story is really Oxford's, which we think it is, then it's interesting perhaps that a good quarto edition of Hamlet came out some months after the apparent death of the Earl of Oxford, that is, at the end of 1604, early 1605. So what we hope is that Horatio did in fact get the story out there, and that the story is Hamlet, and that the story is Oxford's. Hamlet's last words: the rest is silence. And I can't, is it a musical pun? If you have a rest in music, the designation of a rest, that means silence in music. So is his dying word a music pun? Or is he getting a glimpse into the afterlife? Wait a minute. I think something's wrong. Can we play a bit of that again? The last words, really, of Hamlet. The rest is silence. Oh, 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 oh. That's the first folio. Oh, 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 oh. That's Hamlet's last words. So we got basically 400 years of editors deciding, the best play that the best writer ever wrote and the last words of his beloved character, let's just get rid of that. We know better. Now, I guess we're worried that we might end up with something like Bottom dying and melodramatic, oh, and we don't want that. So it's too hard to play. And so they chop it out. But is it not 4 O's? 40, the final signature of Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, O, 40, his code name at court, and the signing off of the most autobiographical character he's ever done, which is Hamlet. All right. Well, Horatio is left, and I think he should have some final words, maybe. Let's see what we've got here.
You from the Polack Wars, and you from England are here arrived. Give order that these bodies high on a stage be placed to the view. And let me speak to the yet unknowing world how these things came about. So shall you hear of carnal, bloody, and unnatural acts, of accidental judgments, casual slaughters, of deaths put on by cunning and forced cause, and in this upshot, purposes mistook, fallen on the inventors' heads. All this can I truly deliver.
Well, interesting that he says that they need to be put on a stage. just means a platform, I suppose, but stage is a kind of a loaded word here. I was reminded this week by our friend Oxfordian Rendrea that Queen Elizabeth, in answering a petition from Parliament to execute Mary Queen of Scots in 1586, said, "We princes, I tell you, are set on stage in the sight and view of all the world, duly observed. So beware and take note." What Horatio describes, I guess, could be the various elements in the plot of Hamlet. And it seems inclined towards the tragical too. Carnal, bloody, unnatural acts. But deaths put on by cunning, there's a lot of plays with fake deaths. And purposes mistook, a lot of plays like that. Fallen on the inventor's head, hung with their own petard. Is he talking about Hamlet? Or really this? The whole schmear. Well, in any case, Fortinbras comes in. The report has Rosencrantz and Guildenstern dead. Fortinbras will take over and says about Hamlet, he was likely, had he been put on, to have proved most royal. And with final martial irony, he says, shoot. So we're going to have a 40 guns salute to Hamlet at the end. But what an irony too. Hamlet was not a warrior. Hamlet was not a soldier. And Hamlet wasn't really even a killer. Exactly. He was an artist in so many other ways. So that's how we end. Final perspective. You got to wonder what would happen if Hamlet actually had a chance to be king. Does anybody like that ever have a chance? And maybe he would have bungled it. You know, he's a poet. And so how political can you be effectively? But look at the jackasses who usually or often become the heads of countries and dream away. My favorite critic, Harold Goddard, writes this: what Hamlet's succession might have meant may be seen by asking, what if on the death of Elizabeth, not James of Scotland, but William of Stratford, had inherited the throne? That would have been England falling before William the Conqueror indeed. And it did so fall in the sense that ever since, Shakespeare has been England's imaginative king who has taught more men and women to play perhaps than any other man in the history of the world. Well, it's not too far a stretch to replace Stratford Will with the 17th Earl of Oxford, the favorite of Elizabeth in many periods of the life there. And maybe that turns out not to have been such a wistful impossibility. All right. So here, I believe, is time for some Q&A. And I did note earlier that, and I think it was Earl said that you would have honeycombs of secret passages. So maybe Claudius could get upstairs in time. Oxford's bad reputation is often the key to his obliteration. That's true. So could Oxford's bad reputation be the true key to the SAQ? Yep, certainly. Puritan political power growing in the 1620s. So the First Folio organizers promoting their project to King James could not marquee Oxford as author due to the less than choir boy lifestyle. Yeah, good point about that. Yeah, there are a lot of elements in the motivations and problems of the First Folio. And I only lament that we missed some opportunities 1623, 2023, to look at more of the peculiarities in the first folio, because I am convinced, along with a few others, that it was not a rush job and bungled, is that those apparent mistakes are not anything of the sort. Another suspicion about Polonius and Ophelia, his phrase, beshrew my jealousy, as applies to Ophelia. Was he abusing her, wanted her for himself? And we won't know. But like so many other things in Oxford's life, and maybe explaining the whole atmosphere of Hamlet, you never can find out. There are no paternity tests. So you're relying on liars and courtiers and mom and, all these people who you can't necessarily trust about your origins or about anything else that's going on in your life. So it's might be enough that Oxford doubted the fidelity of his own wife, that and if so, and he doubts the validity of his eldest daughter Elizabeth, then where did she come from? I know that there is an Oxfordian, I don't want to get in trouble here, but there is an Oxfordian who insists, at least one, maybe others, who insist that it would have been politically advantageous for Polonius to have his daughter, or Burleigh, to have his daughter, Anne Cecil, Oxford's wife, pregnant. Oxford may want not to have that happen, because as long as it's not consummated, that marriage, he could get out of it, and then Queen Elizabeth will decide and he'll be king and everything will be great. But let's get Anne Cecil pregnant somehow. All right. When is the episode of Romeo and Juliet going to be posted? Not sure. But yeah, we got a kind of a backlog of stuff to do. And now, with our 2-episode Hamlet accomplished, I want to think we can breathe a bit and catch up to ourselves. I don't know. Where can you read up on the 40? I don't know for sure. And if you got a question that I am not answering, or I just don't have the answer on the spur of the moment here, feel free to email me. And when I'm in my right mind again and not in the middle of the show, I can probably answer thee acutely. I'm so full of businesses, I cannot answer thee acutely. Did all those dreadful things Horatio mentions at the end happen in the play, or does the author allude to far more and more contemporary stuff? Well, yeah. So I'm saying, like, pretty much a lot is covered in here. And if you read it in the right way, it's not just the tragedies and the horrible things, but, a lot of those events happen in comedies too, and in histories certainly too. The division between history and tragedy, as you know, is pretty thin. So it may too allude to contemporary matters. All right. Is there anything else? Last chance, type into Q&A. All right. Well, then let's wrap up here and remind you that you can plunge further into the Oxfordian perspective on the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship website. That's Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, all one word, .org, where you will find all manner of resources and links, and I think some hilarious videos. Most of my commentary today, and for more, you can visit my website, michaeldelahoyde.org, where some of the rabbit holes I skimmed over might be leading elsewhere. You can also find suggested further readings there, slightly annotated filmography, and it's a big one this time because it's Hamlet, and other information. If you are in the future watching this on YouTube, links to more information can be found in the description. Last but most, I want to thank our actors. Costa Chard as Hamlet. I'm worried the BBC is going to steal him away from us. Richard Clifford as Polonius. Brilliant. I almost regret we had to kill him off. Annabelle Leventon, unusually heartbreaking as Gertrude. Am I right? Michael Dudley as Claudius. Him I'm glad we killed off. That's how good the acting is around here. Phoebe Neer giving us the plethora of Ophelia's emotions all at once. And in the previous episode, special guest star Charles Beauclerc, who is a descendant in the de Vere line, as the first actor. Now, I also think he played the ghost, but Jennifer Newton, our brilliant illuminator of Shakespeare Illuminated, keeps ignoring the question and not telling me. Did he be or not did he be? Next up, let's look at a history play and one of Shakespeare's most obscure. No one watches or reads King John. But what happens when it's examined through the Oxfordian lens? See you next time.